Okie dokie. I'm going to do the usual checking to see if everything is okay thing. And then after we do that, we're just going to get the ball a-rolling. Thank you all for your patience during this challenging time of getting things set up. Kidding. Okay. Let's make sure. Let's see. Are we syncing? Are we currently syncing? Let's see. I think it says the connection is excellent, but I'm having a hard time seeing it. Let me see. Okay, view channel. There we go. I think we're good. Okay, I think that's good. Okay. Very good. Okay. Okay, I think we're good to go. I'm just going to share this real quick on Yield Twitter, and then we're going to get the ball a-rolling. Sorry for the delay, everybody. Thank you so much for being here and listening and watching. Hopefully, we get to have a little fun and create some information that's maybe even perhaps useful for people. Heaven forbid. You know what I mean? You know? Just trying to be of service. Okay. Almost done. So sorry. Okay, here we go. I'm going to push this off real quick. Here we go. There we go. I think we're good to go. I think that's it. I think that's everybody. Absolutely great. All right, here we go. So good afternoon, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are. My name is Dr. Patrick Lockwood, and I am here for our weekly episode of UnShrink Me. So for those of you who are brand spanking new, I hope that you feel free to chat, comment, especially if you watch this or listen to this after the fact, because all thoughts are welcome and all people are welcome here. So this is a weekly podcast with an emphasis on mental health. The spirit with which I created this podcast many months ago was I saw that there was a need for people to understand psychology, psychiatry, anything in the clinical mental health services world better. Because there are so many pervasive myths online and in the public discourse on podcast, Instagram, Twitter, etc. There's a mythology that needs to die, but also there's just a lot of well-meaning people who are misinformed, right? So probably the biggest problem is perfectly thoughtful, perfectly lovely people are somewhat misinformed about what the research actually says, about what clinical wisdom says, what ethics actually dictates. And so this podcast is just to create information for consumers and their families of mental health services. Now, if professionals listen, that's even more awesome, because if professionals listen and comment or chat, then we have a dialogue. And I think it's really awesome when regular people get to see a dialogue among professionals in real time about these topics. So if you're a professional and you're listening, please chat. If you're anybody and you're listening, please chat. I see we have some folks here. Thank you so much for showing up. So this podcast is purely informational. And for the purposes of this podcast, I'm technically Patrick, even though I occupy the space of being a clinical psychologist. So please don't sue me or fire me, cancel me. I mean, if you want to cancel me, that's awesome. But I don't know what it would be about specifically. The burping? By the way, this is full of Celsius and ice. You can't really see it. But I broke the can, honestly. I had a rage fit and I just broke the can, so I don't have a can to show off today. But again, welcome. This is a weekly podcast on mental health. I go through tweets and Instagram posts and things like that, and I just talk about what makes sense and what doesn't make sense so that you, if you are a consumer of mental health services, you can be more informed and make more informed decisions and get better help from yourself, from your provider, etc. So this week's podcast, we're going to talk about men and mental health. We're going to talk about drugs, psych meds in particular, and also non-prescription drugs. We're also going to talk about changing your life and what that means for therapy. And we're also going to talk about severe mental illness versus more mild versions of mental illness. These are the topics for today. And I'm going to start off with kind of a lightweight topic because I think it's kind of fun. This person that I'm going to talk about right now has this handle at Tweet a Therapist. Her name is No BS Therapist. Okay. So this is a fun one because it's a simple one. Okay. So No BS Therapist is someone I've interacted with for about 6 months, maybe a year on here. Lovely person. Don't always agree. All right. So this is what she said, I believe, about 6 days ago. She said, and I quote, "Toxic positivity. Cliches that never belong in a therapy session. Number 1, everything happens for a reason. Number 2, time heals all wounds. Number 3, God never gives us more than we can handle. Number 4, just think positively. In parentheses, positive thinking has benefits. This one's more nuanced. And number 5, everything works out in the end." And so I'm going to start with this one because I think it's very clear to most people in the profession, at least, that there is such a thing as toxic positivity. It is terrible when you emphasize things like gratitude and things like, positive thinking and all this stuff when you're trying to help people with actual mental illnesses. Because people with real serious mental health problems, you can't just think positive thoughts out of your problem. Like, there's no theory of psychology or mental health. There's no theory of therapy that says you can just think more positive thoughts. Excuse me. So like the idea would be that, genuinely speaking, these individuals who just are like, just be grateful at all times or just think positive thoughts every time you have a negative thought, like that doesn't work. Someone diagnosed with major depressive disorder and it's actually real, especially if it's the more moderate or severe type, you cannot just think positive thoughts while you're experiencing severe physical symptoms of depression, such as hypersomnia. You can't think your positive thoughts out of your hypersomnia. It doesn't work that way, right? And so the problem that we face is, or at least the problem I face is that as a practitioner, as a clinical psychologist, as a consultant, and as a professor, I see just a giant amount of negativity in the world. I'm sure you do too. And the problem with that is there's a compelling argument to be made that maybe what the world needs is more positivity. I would say that's actually a very realistic and rational thing to say, personally. Like, society looks kind of messed up. The world seems kind of crazy. And so that can wear you down. It can tear you down. And so, for me at least, there's a need to counterbalance that, to counteract that with some positive thinking, with some gratitude, with some hope. Because to me, at least, there's always hope. The reason I do this podcast is because I have an extreme amounts of hope that things are going to get better, and I have proof that they're already getting better with regard to mental illness and treatment and all these things. So I'm here part of the hope movement, but I'm not naive, and I don't believe it's fair to be toxically positive. So all these pithy sayings that are not so pithy, they're kind of boring at this point, like everything happens for a reason. In fact, everything happens for like a dozen reasons or 1,000 reasons. And so the question is, which reasons are you focusing on is actually the better way of saying that. Everything happens for dozens, if not thousands of reasons. Which ones are you focusing on? Right? And in the mental health setting, in the therapy context, your clinician should be helping you focus on you. What are you doing? How is your behavior affecting your life? What are you thinking? How are you managing your feelings? That's what you should be doing. We should always acknowledge the system and the world we live in because it's nuts and it affects us clearly and consistently across time. That being said, the number one thing we can actually influence as people is ourselves. And so Everything happens for a reason. It's really silly, and if not stupid. Number 2, time heals all wounds. Like, that's kind of not true, actually. A lot of people currently have very, 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 very unhealed wounds, and they've had a decade or 2 decades separate from the traumatic thing that happened to them. So many people were injured in childhood, and they just bleed all over each other as adults. I say this all the time about the LGBT community. I think one of the worst things that happens in the LGBT community is we bleed all over each other. We project our insecurities onto each other. We're overly superficial or vain or sexual in a way that distances ourselves from our body and our needs and our spirituality. It happens all the time, especially in the queer community. But that happens in the straight community as well. So no, time does not heal all wounds. There are many, many, many unhealed people vomiting their pain online, trauma dumping all the time. People project the evilness that hurt them onto the world all day. So there's millions, if not billions, of unhealed people walking around the planet, and time doesn't do shit for wounds. Time just makes you tolerate things, but not heal. Number 3, God never gives us more than we can handle. That's not fucking true at all. Look at all the atrocities that happen all the time. So many people can't handle so many things. There are literally psych hospitals full of people who couldn't handle reality via drugs or schizophrenia or attempts on suicide or whatever it is. There are so many examples all day, every day of like people being beyond what they can handle. And so that's really stupid, to say the least. God certainly gives people challenges. If you are a religious person, God certainly gives us challenges that we should be facing in that context. But like all the time, people get challenges that are more than they can handle. Look at every horror movie and exorcism movie and all those kinds of things. Number 4, just think positively. I already said my piece about that. And number 5, everything works out at the end. No, it doesn't. No, that's not true at all. In fact, one of the things I do with my patients in therapy, and when I do executive coaching or when I do whatever I do, consulting, or even as a professor, it's like I'm extremely realistic with people. A good therapist, let me say this as clearly as possible so everyone can hear it. An ethical therapist is not kissing your ass or telling you it's going to be okay. An ethical therapist is going to tell you the truth. An ethical therapist will be realistic with you. An ethical therapist will not be pessimistic. They will not be overly optimistic or toxically positive. They will be realistic and, I hope, minimally hopeful with you. Because it's not true that everything works out in the end. I have had, a 15 plus year career so far, most of it working in what I call Rehabistan. And it's absolutely the case. It's absolutely the case that not everything works out. People die. One thing that needs to be talked about much more is that people die, especially in the drug rehab setting, but also in the eating disorder setting, but also in the personality disorder treatment setting. People die. Patients die. It's not okay. Nobody likes it. No one's okay with it. None of us are okay with it. We all hate it. I've had the good luck so far of nobody dying under my care so far. However, I've had former patients die, and I've been the one to call their parents and deliver the news because for some reason I was the first one to find out. And that's like a soul-crushing experience. For me, for them, I don't know how people recover from that. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't. And so it is not true that everything works out in the end. So all these euphemisms, all these platitudes are wildly dismissive of the reality of mental illness treatment, but life in general, because life in general is not some fairy tale. I'm very grateful for the very good life that I have. I'm blessed beyond belief, and I work my ass off to have a good life. That being said, bad shit is going to happen. That is normal. It's 100% normal, and it's not being pessimistic to say that. It's being realistic. And as professionals, as clinicians, as psychiatrists, psychologists, LPCCs, LMFTs, whatever you are, if you're an intern, we are ethically required to be realistic about the potential outcomes with our patients. That's what the informed consent process is about, by the way. So informed consent is not just, by the way, these are the limits of confidentiality. I hope therapy works. It's, this is what I reasonably believe we can achieve together. This is what I believe is possible. These are the obstacles. This is what I know, and this is what I don't know. All right? So, all right, Jonathan's here. Good to see you, Jonathan. We were just talking about toxic positivity and euphemisms like it's everything's going to work out, or everything happens for a reason, or, God never gives us more than we can handle, which is all bullshit. It's absolute horseshit because none of those things are true. What's true is, to be realistic, is that there are challenges that we can face. And thankfully, most of the challenges that we experience in life, we can face them. But it's not true that everything works out in the end. It really is not. And I am firsthand experience of that. So, thank you as always, No BS Therapist, for a little grist for the mill to get the podcast kicked off on the correct foot, or whatever foot it's supposed to be. I'm going to say something nice about Justin Garson. All right. So, okie dokie. So, Justin Garson is someone that I've interacted with on Twitter for a number of months now and talked about on the podcast. His handle is at JUSTIN_GARSON. 5 days ago, he posted this thing, which I really want to pick up on and talk at length about because it relates to both good treatment ethics and also what people understand or misunderstand about mental health in the first place. So here's what he said 5 days ago, and I quote, "It's actually funny how we constantly bombard our brains with alcohol, caffeine, nicotine, shitty food, bad sleep, zero movement, and then get anxious and depressed and think maybe I should be on meds." So here's the truth. Here's the God's honest truth. Justin and I have had many disagreements in my time doing this podcast and talking to him on Twitter and stuff. And so I want to give him props for being very realistic about a very serious problem in society. So, dear people struggling with what you believe are mental health issues, please be informed that there is no magical solution to your issues. You cannot psych med away your problems. There is no magic pill that will cure your mental illness. Psych medications, like antidepressants or antipsychotics, have the very explicit purpose of stabilizing severe or difficult to manage symptoms. They do not have the purpose of curing your illness or treating your illness. And so I agree with Justin in the sense that some people have a naive view of psychiatric medications or other types of more intense treatments. That being said, there's this other problem, right? So he talked about diet, bad sleep, shitty relationships, all these things. And so I want to say this in a nuanced way so everyone understands it and hears it very clearly. If you believe you have a mental illness and you can just sleep a little bit better and assert yourself a little more, exercise a little more and all that stuff, and all of a sudden your mood's easy to regulate, you probably don't have a mental health problem. People with a true mental illness cannot just exercise away their depression. People with a true mental illness cannot just get better sleep and their PTSD goes away and becomes manageable. So people that actually have a severe mental health problem that actually requires treatment and intervention need to both take care of their lifestyle issues like sleeping and eating and asserting themselves and all these things, and also doing interventions like psychotherapy, in some cases medication, in some cases more extreme treatment, etc. So I hope you all understand that. That being said, if you are vulnerable, the research is 100% clear. If you are vulnerable to a mental illness, let's say you have a strong family history of schizophrenia or a strong family history of trauma or a strong family history of personality issues, there's a very, very good chance that if you do a bunch of shitty things to your body and your brain, like not sleeping, bunch of alcohol, bunch of other drugs, bunch of caffeine, whatever it is, you're going to tip yourself into a serious problem typically. So everybody, myself included, could have a better relationship with caffeine and drugs. Everyone could sleep better. Everyone could eat better. Everyone could exercise the appropriate amount. Like, I exercise a lot. I was just at the gym before. That's why my hair is a mess. Like, we're all doing pretty good in some ways, but most people could do better in most of these categories. So Justin's wrong that, like, it's just these lifestyle issues that cause mental illness. Jonathan over here says, wait till Justin finds out about holistic psychiatry. Excuse me. Where they won't prescribe you any medications until you're journaling your food intake, sleep, and have full labs done. Yeah, there's tons of holistic psychiatrists out there. My aunt is actually one of those people. Shout out to Pam. And so, there's lots of people who do holistic psychiatry. And the thing is that even if you're sleeping perfectly and your hormones are balanced and your shin is balanced, whatever a shin balance is or whatever, like, you're gonna still need psych meds if you have severe schizophrenia or bipolar or maybe even severe PTSD or super severe depression. Like, there's no, you can't keto away your depression. Chris Palmer, who's the famous psychiatrist who talks about the metabolic issues with psychiatric illnesses, even says that himself. So the question is, are you doing all the lifestyle things you definitely need to be doing no matter whether or not you have a mental illness? Because we all need to eat well and sleep well and have fun and laugh and have good sex and good food and friendships and take care of ourselves and do meaningful work. We all need all of these things. And if you have a real mental illness, especially if it's more moderate to severe, there's no way you can sleep yourself out of your depression. You can't eat your way, you can't vegan your way or keto your way out of your PTSD. It's just not going to happen. You're probably going to need exposure therapy or something. So, on the one hand, I agree with you, Justin. Most people's diets suck. Most people's sleep is suboptimal at best. And everyone needs to work on those things. Change your lifestyle. It'll change your life. The best things that have happened to me as a professional and as a person is working out more and taking better care of my body, is eating better, having more fun, taking better care of my relationships, sleeping better. Those 5 things have made my life insanely different. That being said, those are not cures for mental illnesses. Mental illnesses are real things. All right, let's talk real quick about men. Just real quick. Just real quick. So earlier today, Jonathan says, is my shin between my knee and my foot? Or, yeah, exactly. I don't know what that is. Agreed. Justin is really talking about the worried well more than the seriously addicted or ill. Exactly. He's picking on the worried well. He certainly is. So earlier, I came across this post, and I would just like to give it a shout out because I think it's an important post. And not just because I think it's important. I think it's important because it's actually it's under discussed. So earlier, I found this post. It's a graphic. It's an image that says, nobody checks on a man to see if he's okay. They check to see if he's still useful. So men's mental health is something that I care a lot about, not only because I'm a male, but also because I work a lot with men. And let me say this. This picture that I posted earlier that says, nobody checks in on men to see if they're okay, just to see if they're still useful. It's definitely true that people who agree with traditional versions of masculinity find usefulness or service or doing good things as a core aspect in some ways of masculinity in men. So that could be equated to job or being a dad or a husband or friend or whatever it is. All of which is great, and I have no problem with that. The downside, though, of traditional masculinity, especially taken to its extreme, is usefulness becomes more important than just how you generally are doing. In fact, Jonathan just said, "You're doing all right, Patrick." And thank you for asking, by the way. I'm actually a little under the weather. I was at this fucking charity event, which I'm grateful I get to be on the board of the Friendly House and help them out, but like I can't socialize for the life of me, and so my immune system is kind of fucked right now, but I'm making it through some meds and some Celsius, and so thank you for asking. It makes me happy. And hoorah to you, Phil. Glad you're here. Like, men need to be checked in on. Let me say it super simply. If you want to help men with their mental health, just check in on them. How you doing? How you actually doing? In fact, I just had a phone call with one of my male colleagues in the industry. He was at my table for this event earlier. And, I was just like, how are you actually doing? You doing okay? Because I don't think there's enough of that. I think that conversation is missing. In today's very hyper-capitalist society and competitive society, it's like, how's work and how's the family? Because like these are the boxes you have to check to be a successful man, but I think anyone at this point. But especially for men, the pressure's triple. And so I believe that if we just do some simple things for men in particular, like, how you actually doing? How's your health? How you been feeling? It'll go a long way, because most of us aren't conditioned to talk like that and have chats like that. And it's good because, like, the dudes in my life, including some of the people that are watching and listening, when they check in on me, it feels really good. And it makes my day sometimes because it's the littlest thing. And I've worked with so many men in my career who are decent guys. They're not toxically masculine or some shit like that. They're not disgusting. They're not perverts. They're not gross. They're not narcissists. They're good people. They're good dudes. And very few people are just like, how you been? So what I would say is, let's let men be people too. Let's let men be regular people too. Because there's a lot of people who hate men, feminists and whatever. There's a lot of people who are like Andrew Tate retards who believe men are a certain stereotype or whatever. And then there's actually like the sane regular people who understand that men are just regular people. So sometimes men need to be checked in on. How are you doing? It's not, how's your career? How are the kids? How's this? How's the gym? I mean, I like it when people ask me about the gym because it matters to me, but like, there's more to me, right, than the gym. And so many patients I've dealt with who are males are missing that. Like, how are you actually doing? How are you actually doing? And by the way, just rule of thumb from a therapist to the rest of the world, these are words that should be off limits. If you care about your mental health, if you care about your friend's mental health and your family's mental health, here are some words that should never be used if you actually care about each other's mental health. Good, fine, okay, great, bad, terrible. All of those words are weasel words. And if you actually care about people's mental health, you will never use those words ever again. Because those are placeholder words that don't actually describe a specific instance of what's going on with you. So don't use placeholder words. And if your therapist is putting up with good and fine and okay and not querying you and prompting things, your therapist sucks. Your therapist is enabling you, and that's bad. So, just for what it's worth. So please check in on the men in your life. If they're your friends, if they're your colleagues, if they're your family, if they're your professor like me. My students don't need to check in on me. I check in on them because they're the ones who need it more. I'm in the position of privilege. All right, so check in on men. Dear men, are you okay? Absolutely. All right, let's move on to the next topic. Again, thank you all for being here, for watching and listening. It's awesome to have you here. All right, let's talk about change in therapy. Okay, so here's an interesting post that I want to spend some more time talking about because it applies to what it means to actually change in therapy. Okay? Phil says, if I'm okay, you're okay. Yeah, well, if I'm okay, you must be okay. You're here, right? So 3 days ago, the psychiatrist I followed named Keith Sakata, his handle is at KeithSakata, he said, I'm going to quote this and then I'll tell you my response. He said specifically, oh, hold on. I'm about to be interrupted rudely. Hold on. Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry. She was going to knock over the camera. This is Willow, everybody. If you haven't seen Willow, this is my girl Willow. She's super cool. This is like my Dr. Evil cat, Mr. Bigglesworth. Yes, Mr. Bigglesworth. Oh, hello, madam. Hello. I understand you're very curious and you want to sit on the desk because for those of you who don't know, sometimes when I'm sitting here doing work or whatever it is, she'll join me on the desk when there's not a camera sitting on the desk. But I have to go. You have to go too. I'm so sorry. I apologize. Everybody, for the interruption. But that's Willow. All right. So anyways, I was just talking about Keith's post, Dr. Sakata. Here's what he said. There she is back there. She's over there. What is she doing? All right. Dr. Sakata said, the most brilliant way to change your life, and he said the order of this matters, is number 1, decide that you never want to feel or do X behavior, etc. ever again. Number 2, then take full accountability for changing it. Number 3, put a trusted friend or therapist in your corner. He said, self-love equals no longer accepting a life you are unhappy with. So this might fall to some of your ears in the category of like pseudo-spirituality, toxic positivity stuff. But it actually makes a lot of sense from the idea of like informed consent and structured therapy. And I said, I completely agree. This is very, very difficult to do though. So please enlist as much support as possible. Family, friends, spouse, trusted coworkers, and maybe a therapist. So let me explain this to everyone, especially if you're not a professional. You know, when you go to therapy, when you meet a psychiatrist or a psychologist like myself or any other kind of therapist, you're specifically signing up for a therapeutic relationship where your professional is using specific interventions to help you change a known, very easy to see or agree upon problem. So that problem should be clearly definable such that we can do something about it, right? And so what Keith said, Dr. Sakata said, is absolutely correct for all types of psychotherapy, whether it's depth-oriented, long-term, tell me about your childhood and how your mom didn't hug you enough shit, or it's short-term therapy to address maybe a simple phobia, for instance. So again, his order was, number 1, decide that you never want to feel that thing again or do that behavior ever again. Number 2, then take full accountability for changing it. I'm going to say more about that. And number 3, put a trusted friend or therapist in your corner. So have accountability, right? So I think, number 1, decide you never want to feel that again. Now that's very messy and complicated. I could probably speak for hours about that because many people, become identified with their illness actually. For instance, there's a subset of people with a real mental illness who start to identify as sick. Sick becomes normal for them in their mind. And so the downside or the problem with that is that when you identify with your illness, what that means specifically is that your illness becomes the most important thing about you, right? It's like the people who make the sexuality the most important part of their life. I have many friends in the LGBT community that being gay or trans or whatever is the most important thing about them. But it's actually not. There's no one slice of our self-concept. To be mentally healthy, there's no one slice that is the most important at all times. So you have to have flexibility around your self-concept. You can't be rigid. So when people become identified with their illness, sometimes they don't actually want to fully change. Sometimes they're very ambivalent, conflicted about changing. Right? This happens with severe depression. They feel like they're stuck in a hole. This is who I will always be. I'll never get out of this hole that we call depression. Or trauma. Some people with very severe trauma have identified with being a victim, and that's all they know. All they know is I am a victim. And that's what they become. And they cannot see themselves as anything else. Or worse, some people cling on to their label. I am an addict. I'm a narcissist. I'm a this, that, or the other. And that becomes the most important thing about them. So actually healing is contradictory to the idea of that label being the most important thing about you. So for some people, decide you never want to feel that way again or do that behavior ever again is extremely challenging. So just know, if you're looking to get therapy about something, if you believe you have a mental health problem that needs treatment, just know that number one, deciding I never want to feel that way again is actually not super simple. It's actually probably the most challenging thing about this entire process of doing therapy for mental illness is actually number one. It's actually firmly committing to feeling better. That's why MI is so helpful, motivational interviewing, because it helps us use ambivalence to move across the trans-theoretical model, the stages of change, to be in action and stay in action so you can get to maintenance. So the number two thing is take full accountability for changing it. So let me just take a drink here. So here's the deal. Taking full accountability for changing a behavior or a problem in your life does not mean dismissing the real world problems that are affecting you. So, taking accountability for changing something does not mean that the outside world magically never affects you ever again. It's like, you're, being shot at, but you should be happy. It's like, no. Being shot at's a real problem. That's a real problem, right? It's like, I'm going home to a domestic violence relationship, intimate partner violence, but you should just assert yourself more. It's like, that's fucking stupid. It's like, no, there's a real context that people have to address. And sometimes the real context is insurmountable without extra support, which is number three. So it's not so easy as just to say, take full accountability for changing it. He's not saying, I think, ignore the circumstances. He's saying, whatever is in your control, take 100% accountability for whatever is in your control. So for some people whose lives are all messed up from top to bottom, they have no support, they have no friends, they have no resources, they have no time, no money, no energy. Sometimes the only thing in your control is just making a better decision about the thought you're having right now. Right now, I'm having thoughts to beat myself up. I'm just going to try and challenge those thoughts. And that's the best you can do. Sometimes that's it. But some of us are lucky to have support in friends and family. And so sometimes the next thing we have to do is enlist that support, which is number three. But taking full accountability for what's in your control is not the same thing as dismissing or invalidating the real life problems outside of you that are affecting your mental health. You have to be able to do both. Oh, Jonathan says, Prochaska, Celsius drinking game. That would be so fun. We got to get together as a group and do that. That's a tangent for a different day. For those of you who know what Prochaska is, stage of change, trans-theoretical model. Norcross and Prochaska. All right. So I like Neil's post because all three steps have to happen in order. First, you have to decide you never want to feel that way ever again. That can take time. You might be in therapy or in rehab or whatever, and you're still deciding. You're still in the process of deciding because it's an active thing that you want to get better. And then once you do finally get in that action state of change, do everything you can to take full advantage of everything in front of you to change whatever it is. Whether it's an unhelpful thought, a mood state you can't manage alone, whatever it is. And get as much support as possible. If you have a real mental health problem, if you have a valid depression, whatever diagnosis, doesn't matter what it is, don't do anything alone. No one is required to get healthy alone. None of us got sick alone, and none of us get healthy alone. That's true for me. That's true for my friends and family. That's true for all of my patients. The system around you, enlist it. Ask for people for help. Ask for people to support you. Maybe they can't help you in big ways, but maybe they can do little things like checking in on you. That's great. Sometimes the little things are the most important things. So please, if you believe that you or someone you know has a mental health problem, try to support them. Try to seek out social support. as much as possible. Sometimes your social support sucks. Sometimes your parents suck. Sometimes your spouse sucks and they can't support you. So you need family therapy or couples therapy or whatever it is to help. But find support. There's free support groups. There's NAMI. There's AA and NA and Smart Recovery and Dharma Recovery and all those things. So find support. No one gets sick alone. No one gets healthy alone. Okay? I hope that makes sense. Okay. Okie dokie. All right. I'm going to talk about Dr. James Davies. I've spoken about him at length. Let me just post this real quick. Okay. So Dr. Davies has a very kind of like hot and cold relationship with things being clear. And so this post of his is especially confusing to me. And I'm going to try and walk through it because, again, there's so many people online, PhD, PsyD, MD, LMFT, whatever. There's so many therapists and clinicians and researchers and professors online. I'm trying to call things out and clarify things so that we can have a better relationship with mental health, what it is, what it isn't, what mental illness is and isn't, and all these things. So here's what he posted, and here's what I have a problem with. Okay. So here's what he said about a week ago. He said, the one reason I can find why mental health professionals are so attached to describing certain emotional states as pathological is because this ideological framing of pathological keeps these states under their jurisdiction. The phrase is outdated, has no explanatory power or scientific basis. Okay. So here's a problem that everyone should be aware of whenever I post something or your favorite Instagram influencer posts something or a fucking life coach or whoever posts things. Anytime you hear a variant of this phrase, you should always think that's bullshit. Okay. So he said, the one reason. Okay. Any sentence that starts off like that has like one thing being blamed, 9.99999 times out of 10, it's never one thing. There's never one reason. People and their motivations are never that simple. Okay? So he said, the one reason I can find why mental health professionals are so attached to the describing certain emotional states as pathological is because we want to control it and treat it and have special status and privilege. That's insane. Number one, I would love for everyone who has very severe symptoms to never need my help or a colleague's help. I would love that. I really would. I would love for people to just be able to get better sleep and never be bipolar. I would love that. Dr. Willergater says the one reason he could find, consider he sucks at looking for things. Yeah, he probably does. Or he's just biased, right? Like, it's real simple to me. People's motivations are complicated. Different types of mental health professionals will have different motivations for pathologizing things. And even over pathologizing things irrationally or unrealistically or problematically. But certain emotional states are highly pathological. There's no human being who could be floridly psychotic. So if you don't know the definition of the word floridly, check it out. But someone who is struggling with schizophrenia or paranoia and they are floridly psychotic, there's no way they can have an adaptive life in any culture. None. No way. It's impossible. If you have very severe bipolar disorder, where your manic symptoms like grandiosity or flight of ideas or serious impulsivity, like if you have any of those three symptoms at the severe end of the spectrum, there's no way in the world you can adapt in any society that exists on this planet. None. There's no culture that's good for extreme grandiosity. You're going to be an outlier in society, and people aren't going to know what to do with you. That doesn't mean there aren't some societies that will handle it better or than others. But serious bipolar 1, PTSD, depression, whatever it is, there's no way. There's zero way that calling that okay or normal is going to fly and you're going to have an adaptive, functional, healthy life. Because I care about my degree and my license and my title, I care about actually people getting better and ethics. Dr. Davies, what the fuck? Like, there are very, very seriously ill people who will get hospitalized, and not because society just doesn't accept their symptoms or stigmatizes them, because they're literally out of control. I've dealt with so many people who were so intoxicated on meth or alcohol that they are a danger to themselves and other people. There are people who are so suicidal that they are a danger to themselves. So, dear Dr. Davies, what the ever-loving fuck? Like, there are many reasons why mental health professionals like myself ethically would like certain things to be considered pathological, because they have crystal clear, repeatable consequences over time. I don't care if there's not a unitary neurological basis for serious major depression or bipolar or whatever. It doesn't matter. If there are 6 different reasons why people are bipolar 1, or 1,000, or 10, or 4, or 2, whatever it is, I don't care that there's not one particular brain system involved in serious major depression. There are many. That's okay. Depression is complicated. PTSD is complicated. All these things are complicated. That doesn't mean that you have to have some crystal clear, perfectly identifiable in the brain thing for it to be a valid, treatable, manageable mental health problem. Okay? And also, there is a scientific basis for many of these severe symptoms. Crystal clear. It's not just stigma. It's not just society is not accepting people. Okay? Oh, Dr. Davies. Let's talk again just real quick about psych meds. Okay. So, I talked about this 2 days ago. I'm just going to post it real quick. Okay. Last topic. So Robin Carhart Harris, who's a big psychedelic researcher, said, "I'm fascinated by the question of whether psychiatric medications can promote subtle character drifts, like personality drifts. For example, could SSRIs promote a subtle callousness? ADHD, stimulant meds, a subtle individualism?" So here's what I said. The problem is that SSRIs are not precision medications. They are analogous to sledgehammers, not scalpels. Most people need minor surgery, not a major remodel, though some people do need the hammer. So again, just to educate, this is me speaking as a clinical psychologist, a person who's taught psychopharmacology for years. So psych medications are useful for a variety of psychiatric illnesses, and especially trying to stabilize psychiatric illnesses short term. But when I said that psych meds are closer to sledgehammers, I mean that. Because a sledgehammer is not used to make fine, refined changes to a wall or whatever. A sledgehammer is designed to literally break down whatever material is in front of it so that new things can be added to it. Psych meds don't do that. Psych meds do exactly that. Psych meds are trying to broadly affect the flow of neurotransmitters and stabilize the flow consistently over time. But most mental illness states need more than just stabilization of the flow of neurotransmitters, because most of the dysfunction in the brain, in the mind, etc., is much more nuanced and subtle than that. So psych meds are great in the acute, severe stage of a mental health problem. However, their utility waxes and wanes, and typically wanes a lot, as the person becomes more stable and has more resources and insight and judgment and coping skills and all these things. So psych meds are great. They might promote subtle changes to how you generally function. So I've heard from a number of patients that their SSRIs did kind of make them super stable and a little numb, which meant that they felt numb and they interacted with people in kind of a bland way compared to their prior personality. And that's a trade-off that you consciously make and your doctor will talk with you about, that you can talk about. It's not a rare thing, it's not a weird thing, and it can change. So he's kind of correct. You know? And I'd like to end today's podcast by just discussing the event I was at earlier today. So I'm on the board of this women's substance abuse treatment program called the Friendly House. It's here in Los Angeles. The Friendly House is the nation's oldest women's treatment program, especially for drugs and addiction. And one of the things I noticed is that, most of these galas and things like this here in LA at least are, they're places for people to glad hand, get to know each other, network or whatever. But, a lot of the speakers were alumni of the program. And they spoke with a lot of passion for the Friendly House. And so I'm not necessarily here advertising for them, but I want to talk about something that's super important for treatment. If you have a loved one who in particular has like a serious drug problem we call an addiction, there's one thing the Friendly House does very well that every speaker who got up on stage who is an alumni or staff or board member talked about. And I think it really needs to be reiterated because I think it's something that's missing in our discussion nowadays about mental health and mental illness. So everyone who got up spoke in a crystal clear way about the importance of community. And so I want to just say a few words about that because in my life, in my professional experiences in my career as both a professor and a clinician and a consultant, I can tell you that there is something extremely healing about community. There is nothing, in my opinion, more healing than community. If it's the right kind of community. And I think that's what the Friendly House excels at. And so what I think is missing from not only the culture wars and religion and therapy and online and all this stuff, there's no discussion of community anymore. We're arguing about symptoms. We're arguing about whether or not this illness is real, whether or not meds work. We argue about whether or not so-and-so is correct. We argue about all these things. And in many cases, professionals tear each other down in a way that's not constructive. So I'm not trying to tear anybody down here with this podcast. I'm trying to criticize ideas, not people. Right? I'm not angry at Dr. James Davey. I'm not angry at Justin. I don't want those ideas to cause people to not get the help they need or to misunderstand what they're going through. So I want to create community. I want everyone to find the community they need to be okay. And the problem that I see is that it's very hard, especially for people with mental illnesses, to find community. There's this crystal clear tell that community is one of the most powerful forces. And the evidence for it might shock some of you, but I want you to just hear me out. So one of the ways that I know community is so powerful is AA, etc. works really, really well for the people who do it. But beyond that, the homeless are the perfect example of this. So here in LA, we have a drastic homelessness problem. Probably one of the worst in the country, if not the worst. And what's fascinating is, if you compare LA's homelessness problem to San Francisco's, you'll see different types of cultures and dynamics evolve. Some of that is because of funding and treatment, intervention, case managers, all that stuff. Laws, how law enforcement interacts with them. But what's interesting is that many of these people who are currently homeless will not take services from the state. They send like case managers out into the streets, the bridges to find people. And many people will not take advantage of services that are being freely offered to them. Housing, meds, treatment, a shower, whatever it is. And the reason they won't is because they don't want to leave their community. Because if you go into state-supported housing, you're losing your people, you're losing your norms, you're losing your culture. And people bond. People become part of a community. And they don't want to leave it because it becomes normal, because it becomes safe and understandable. And the world outside of that community, the non-homeless world, is radically unsafe. And so there's so many examples like that just proves the fact that community is one of the most important sources of stabilizing anyone who is struggling. And so what I will tell you is, if you have a community, you should be grateful. If you have like a religious community or a social community or work community, whatever it is, that is a key to your mental health. That is a key to your stabilization as a person. You are not stable and sane because you're so smart, you're so healthy, so hot, so rich, so smart, whatever it is. All human beings are stable because we have a community of people that support us in some ways. Sometimes our support sucks. Sometimes it's mediocre. Sometimes it's okay. Sometimes it's good. Our job is to find better and better community. And if you're capable of supporting community, like one of the reasons I spend all this money as a board member on, the Friendly House Gala and help create it and, all this stuff with the board as a member on the board, is because the Friendly House has a solid community and they need help and they need money and they need support because it's a nonprofit and little nonprofits can't compete with these for-profit programs. They're not rich, so they need help. But beyond just pitching for the Friendly House, whatever community you find yourself in, whatever city you live in, if you can support a local community, especially a mental health or an addiction recovery community, please do that. If you go to church and your church takes donations or collects money to help local services, please donate. Because community is what helps people heal and stabilize more than anything. And it's more important than ever because the world sucks. We're all divided. We hate each other because of politics and religion and LGBT and all this shit. And community is what keeps us sane. Our habits help. Our beliefs help. Spirituality helps. But community is one of the most important things that we take for granted. And we need to not take it for granted. So I hope this makes sense to everyone. And I hope that wherever you are on your mental health journey, that you find the community you need, be it professional, peer support, or just family and friends. So that's all I got for today. I'm out of steam. I hope this has been helpful in some way. I hope that you understand how important mental health is and being clear about what is and is not helpful, what's true and not true from the point of view of the research and ethics and all these things. If you found this podcast helpful in some way, please like and share and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. Please send it to people who might be struggling. Please send it to people who have family who are in recovery or are trying to get help. Whatever I can do to help, please let me help. My DMs are open on Twitter at Dr. Lockwood. Whatever I can do to help, I'm here for it. And as always, I like to end this podcast with a joke. And so here we go. I once had this patient who had a really bad phobia of apples. Believe it or not. First time in my career I ever had a patient who was terrified of fruit. Believe it or not. So he had a phobia of apples. Apparently something traumatic happened as a kid. I don't even know. But he had this pervasive phobia of apples. He couldn't even say the word. And so when you're trying to treat a phobia, you do exposure therapy. You create a fear hierarchy, and you deal with the easiest thing, move up to the hardest thing. So we did the exposures. We first started to get him to talk about apples, and then we showed him a picture of apples. And at the end of his treatment, his last exposure was to make an apple pie with his wife. And he did it. He did it. He did it. And so he came into therapy the next week. He did the exposure. He sent me pictures of the apple pie. And so the first thing I said to him when he walked into my office the next week after making the apple pie with his wife was, and I just couldn't help myself, I said, "So how do you like them apples?" All right. Good to see you all. I hope everything is well with you. Take care of yourself. Eat good food. Have good friends. Take good care of each other.